small till it ain't, till it ain't, till it ain't, till it ain't. I'm building up a wall till it breaks. She hated when I call and it's late. I don't wanna keep you waiting. I hope I never keep you waiting. She think I know it all, but I don't. Welcome to this week's episode of the Mixtape with Scott. I'm the host, Scott Cunningham. I'm a professor of economics at Baylor University in Waco, Texas. This is a podcast devoted to the personal stories of living economists. Uh, every couple of weeks, I put out a new podcast where I interview an economist, talk about their life. These are usually people that are in some way connected to a broader story that I've been sort of interested in. One of the broader stories that I've been interested in is the credibility revolution, and specifically the economists that won the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago, Dave Card, Josh Angrist, and Hito Embens. And I've been interested in their students, and I've been interested in their colleagues. This week's guest is one of Dave Card's students, Philip Oreopoulos at the University of Toronto. Phil did his PhD at UC Berkeley back in 2002 and has gone on to be a very successful labor economist with a lot of important work in the area of education as well as other topics. And in this interview, we talk about his whole life growing up in Canada, uh, going off to University of Western Ontario, where he majored in economics and sort of had inside him this interest that I'll let him tell you about that kind of persisted throughout his whole career. It's been a real pleasure to get to know Phil over the last several years, or meeting him for the first time several years ago. I wouldn't say that we're close yet. Phil, though, I along with Daniel Bergstresser, started the AEA 5K, which was an annual race that was done at the ASSA meetings. And I think it was probably 2018, maybe, when we had the inaugural AEA 5K, or maybe it was 2019. I don't remember. And Phil Oreopoulos was the first place winner. One of the things we didn't really get a chance to talk about in this interview was that Phil is essentially an elite runner, and he's a very, very cool person, and a person that I have enjoyed kind of getting to know a little bit and look forward to getting to know a lot better. Thanks so much for supporting the podcast and for tuning in. I hope that you enjoy this interview as much as I did. Okay, well, this is a lot of fun. I'm gonna let my guest introduce himself. Can you tell us, Phil? Can you tell us your full name, your full title with all the words in it, and who pays your paycheck?
I'm Philip Oreopoulos. I'm a distinguished professor in economics of education at the University of Toronto, and I'm also the co-chair of education in JPAL North America.
Oh, okay. Okay, wait. So your title says economics of education in it, not just economics?
Yeah, there was just a little chair position that comes along with distinguished professor, and they asked me to put a title on it, so that's the one I
Oh,
chose.
okay. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Does that mean that kind of you sort of self-identify even in your mind a little bit, like with that extra part, education economist?
Yeah, more and more I'm specializing in education policy. So
Oh, oh, that's cool. Okay. Well, before we get started, I wanted to do an icebreaker. What's a vacation you took? It doesn't matter when you took it, but you still find yourself thinking about it every now and then.
uh, I think I would say when I was young, every year we went to cottage country in Ontario, about like an hour and a half, or 3 hour drive up north. And in that place, we had like a 1 week uh, resort where we kind of stayed the whole family and we did all these kind of activities, water skiing, fishing,
Mm.
playing baseball. And so that was a nice moment with the whole family that we would do every year in August.
Wait, so what's the cottage country? What is that?
So in Canada, it's common to have your house um, in urban Toronto or another urban city, but then have an escape house that would
Oh,
be like an hour or a bit more away and
oh.
just sort of tuck away, and that's where you would get away from it all.
Wait, is that where you spent your summers as a kid? You just that was the kind of thing you would
O-
do?
Only for a week. There's some people who do
Oh,
it like every weekend or as much as they
okay.
can. In the summer, they'll get off there for like 2, 3 months.
Oh, okay. So wait, where did you grow up anyway? I know you grew up in Canada, but where in Canada did you grow up?
I actually grew up here in Toronto, up
Oh,
on the sort of northwest corner of the city.
oh, okay. So you're a city boy.
I'm a city boy, yeah, for
Oh,
sure.
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
What'd your parents do for a living?
So, my father's from Greece. His parents were refugees from Turkey, and they eventually migrated to Athens, where he was born.
Huh.
He lived as a child in very poor, war-torn conditions, with surrounded by really hard work ethic, and he eventually became a doctor.
Hmm.
And then he had a chance to do like a postdoc in Toronto. So he came when he was like 35.
Oh.
And he met my mom, who was a registered nurse in the same hospital.
Oh, wow. Wait, so he got his medical license in Greece?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And then he
Wow.
did he did his PhD in Belfast, and he was more actually on the research side of medicine. He was heavily involved in the science of kidneys. He was a nephrologist.
Oh, wow. So he did the PhD and the MD.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow. But did you have any siblings?
Yeah, I have a fraternal twin, and he's a vascular surgeon also in Toronto.
Oh.
Uh, I have a sister over in Edmonton, and I have a brother who does bioengineering.
Oh,
Actually,
wow.
the the joke is my twin is the least educated. My dad was he'd always said, "I'm going to support all of you until you finish your full-time education." So we optimize on that, and we all got PhDs.
Right. Yeah, exactly. He can't take it back. That's oh wow. You're the only one then that didn't do anything in healthcare.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a black sheep on that. Yeah.
Oh wow. Huh. Well, what kind of things interested you as a kid? What kind of games and stuff like that did you like to do on the weekends and things?
Um, let's see. I got into music. I was actually a bit of an artsy as a kid. I started playing the cello,
Oh.
so I did a bit of that, and then as you know, I started getting into sports. There was one summer where all my friends were working and I had nothing to do, so I just started biking along these trails back and forth every day because I was bored. And by the end of the summer, I started really getting into cycling and started trying out different races and thinking this was kind of neat. And before I knew it, I joined a club and started to become more and more competitive in that area. So that's kind of how I got into sports.
Huh. Wait, what age is that? And what
It was
sports?
around,
It was mainly like was it running at that point or was it
no, it was
mainly
cycling.
biking?
Cycling was my first sport around age of say 14.
Oh. That wasn't as common back then, was it, to do the kind of athletic biking? Or
I
was it?
mean, a a group of riders existed around the province. Like whenever we got together for races, there was a decent number of people who wanted to race.
I bet it was a little bit more selective though. I mean, it seems like it's super popular now, but I would think when you were in high school or when you were younger that it was selecting on a lot of fairly serious athletics. Is that true or am I misreading?
Maybe, I mean, one of the nice things about living in a big city is that you can find
Yeah.
people of any hobby you want. So in cycling,
Right.
there was a club of around 10, 15 riders always ready to
Mm.
go.
You think you just the physical part is it was it the competitive part that drew you to those things, or was it the just being physical?
I think a bit of both. It was just really nice as a chance to escape and doing something that was different from everything else.
Mm.
And on the competitive side, it was nice to get into shape and to feel in shape and do something that other people couldn't do.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Were you quickly really good? Did that happen pretty
No.
fast?
I mean, I was okay, but I wasn't at the top of the pack. And in fact, with cycling, I was falling a lot and eventually
Mm.
migrated to triathlon because you didn't have to draft behind and it wasn't as dangerous.
Oh.
And then when I got to college, it just took too long to train for triathlon. And I dropped back to just running and joining the cross country and the track club. And that's kind of
Oh.
how I traded everything for a pair of running shoes and just did that.
Oh, wow. So in high school, what were your favorite subjects in high school?
I mean, math was something that I paid a lot of attention to. I had a really good teacher in history on world history. That was a fun subject. Um, English, I think we covered a lot of interesting books.
You were a
So
big reader as a young person. You've always been because you've got a lot of books behind you. You were always a big reader.
yeah, I had a lot of um, chances to read books for fun and before I went to bed,
Oh,
short stories. I read a lot of Stephen King, which
yeah. Were you
uh,
reading a lot of him in high school?
yeah, a little bit, not as much as I do now, but I just found some of his books intriguing. And beyond the horror side, he had a tendency of just getting under the skin of what was going on inside someone's head, which I
Yeah.
kind of enjoyed.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Uh, what's your favorite, just out of curiosity, what are some of your favorite, you don't have to tell me your favorite, but what are some of the ones you really love?
My favorite book and my favorite movie are Shawshank Redemption.
Oh yeah, yeah,
So that's
man.
one of the short stories. But if you haven't, I know a lot of people have seen the movie, which I think for a lot of people resonate. Every guy likes a good redemption story,
Yeah.
but the book's also great.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
So you graduate. What did you want to be when you grew up, when you were getting towards the end of high school?
So I was a bit of an artsy. I was a cellist for the middle of high school, but then it kind of became apparent I wasn't going to be a professional musician.
Mm,
And then I started thinking about business. Around that time, the movie Wall Street came out. I was kind of thinking maybe I like the idea of being an investment banker. I
mm,
started doing co-op in one of these firms, working summer jobs as a gopher for a bond desk. And so I
yeah.
became interested in business. So I switched high schools. I went from a art school to like a public school known for being for getting people into business schools,
Oh.
and the Western University of Western Ontario had a reputation for having a good business school, so I started focusing on that. I knew that economics was also a part of business, and I was interested in that. And then when I got to college, I took my first economics class, and I don't know, within the first 3 weeks, I realized it was that subject I was interested in, not business.
Mm,
I was more interested in how the whole system worked and thinking about how to use that to maybe make people's lives better. It was sort of a
mm,
philanthropic motivation,
mm,
and uh, the the topics, the science of trying to understand why some people are rich and some people poor really fascinated me. And I just,
mm.
within the first semester, I was sort of focused on knowing I would try to get a PhD and pursue this field.
Not just the math. You're not, it wasn't the I loved economics because it was like scientific and mathematical. It was more the I wanted to understand the world and thinking about thinking about people's overall livelihood getting better.
Yeah, absolutely. The math part was something I realized I had to learn,
Yeah.
but the economics part, the study of how people make decisions and, being exposed to images of people having a really difficult time scraping
Mm,
by. I still have in my desk of trinkets picture that I clipped out in high school of someone during one of the recessions, just standing outside in the cold with a sign that said, "We'll work for food, God bless."
mm,
And that
mm,
kind of image resonated for me as something like, why does something like this happen? How can we make it better? And
right.
I think a lot of us, go into these kind of professions with the idea that this is maybe an avenue that we can pursue to help, contribute at least to the idea of making people helping others.
Mm. Did you say that your dad grew up in sort of a war-torn kind of situation? Did you say that at the start? That he had some struggles early on?
Yeah, when he was, his parents were sort of there was an exodus of Greeks from Turkey, I think in the 20s, and they had to get up and leave. He comes actually from a family of 18. Only
Oh,
five kids, only five kids survived, and he
oh
was he
gosh.
was the youngest. And but by the time they got to
He lost
Athens,
all of his siblings like that?
yeah, there was just through various like health reasons, some were accidents. I don't know all the full stories of behind them, but there
Oh
was a lot of,
gosh.
yeah, yeah. But then, his parents had to leave and get up whatever they left, wealth they accumulated in Turkey, they left behind. And they arrived in Greece, which was exposed to World War II. And they had, they had to build everything from scratch. So his father was just working as hard as he could to kind of support everyone. And there was a,
Mm,
a really hard work ethic from the family of, uh, we may not be the smartest, but we make up for it in hard work. And so he had that work ethic when he finally made it to university. And he was known for someone who worked really hard to
wow.
finish med school quickly.
So you grew up, did you kind of grow, the reason why I asked that, did you grow up with this sense that there was hardship? He would talk about, you guys would sort of talk about the hardships that some people just sort of have.
I think there was a little bit that underlying, like he would always enjoy us watching us eat, and it was sort of the
Ah,
the idea that I think he felt satisfaction that he could provide for his family. Um, where it came more was around this work ethic, this idea of that you know you can get anywhere you want if you work hard enough, and education is the key for all of that. So that was
mm,
sort of a big part of my
mm,
upbringing.
mm.
He quoted Aristotle a lot around the roots of education are bitter, but the fruit is sweet.
Oh, wow. Huh. Wow. So he sort of saw education as being sort of a key to this getting out of poverty or getting into a better place. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I think it's fair to say like that had some influence on me as well and what I decided to pursue for my own research.
Mm,
Um, I had a bit of an experience myself when I was in my first year at college. I didn't do so well on my calculus, and uh, I because of that, I didn't get into the honors program in economics in my second year, and it just hit me. I was sort of devastated because I had decided my first year I wanted to do well and do a PhD, and then
Oh,
um, it was a realization that maybe I didn't work hard enough and I wasn't sort of taking the first year seriously enough. And now I'm in this horrible situation that now I didn't get into the program I wanted. But there was a backdoor way in, and I could still get into the honors program if in my second year I took all these courses and all of them were above an A. And
oh,
so I went into the second year saying, okay, I don't know what's going to happen, but I will not use, uh, it won't be because I didn't try hard enough. So I just changed my attitude around uh, what my priorities were, what my focus was, and everything was about getting grades and doing well in the school. And at that point, everything came uh, as well as could.
mm,
And then for me, I just realized, oh, that's how you get the good grades. There's no secret. You just work hard for it. It doesn't have to
right.
be because whether you're smart or not. And
Mm,
that experience, which might be like my greatest failure, I guess,
right.
that experience reinforced, I guess, what my dad was saying. And
Mm,
that idea that through education or learning can open up a lot of doors and help with your self-sufficiency to attain a career that you want, that motivated me also around this idea of can others do this as well? If I can do it, this is a path that's available to a lot of people. Um, is there a way to promote education and learning as a way of getting out of poverty, as a way of, um, you know, uh, maximizing your well-being over your lifetime?
yeah. Yeah. Well, so you stay, were you taking any classes in labor? Was it labor that was, or was it, as a young person, when you say you're sort of drawn to this like economics and thinking about how the world works and making it better, you could have easily become a macroeconomist. There's so many ways that resonates with a lot of people. But were you already sort of like that the big L kind of was in your mind?
No, I was
Okay.
not Big L until David Card came around.
Oh, really?
I was going to be a macroeconomist. I was
Oh,
really
really?
interested in macro, also development
Yeah.
economics, so world poverty that also interests me, but I thought that was too big of a problem to handle. And
Right,
so
right.
for my undergrad thesis, I was working on what's called generational counting, which was this method developed by Larry Kotlikoff and Alan Auerbach on how to um,
Oh.
use the government's intertemporal budget constraints to back out and predict what the cost to future generations will be from current debt levels, uh, sort of some measure of how sustainable the government is
Oh.
and what the implications are of current spending. And I did that for Canada, copying what they had done for the US, and that was sort of um, my push towards public finance and macro. That was kind of where I was headed.
You were studying Alan very closely, sort of as a college student, because I know he becomes one of your advisors.
So that there's a link there. I was mostly working with Larry Kotlikoff and his research advisor to get help in doing it for Canada. But when
Hmm.
it came time to, Larry was at Boston University. Alan had just moved to Berkeley. And so when it came time to shop around for schools, Berkeley was uh, more appealing of a place to want to get in. And
Oh,
so
you could have gone to Boston. You wanted to study with either of those men?
uh, my goal was try to get into as best school as possible.
Okay.
And so I flew over to meet with Alan even before they had made any admissions decisions.
Oh,
And uh, we had a nice meeting, and I said, look, it's no secret that I would love to be your RA. I'm doing all this work. I've applied to Berkeley. I don't know if that had any impact, but
Yeah.
it was certainly great to meet him. And
Yeah.
when I got the offer, I was really excited about the idea of spending some time with him and headed in that direction.
Oh wow. So that even though it's public finance, it's like macro level public. It's like macro public kind of work. It's still not microeconomics as much, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Ah,
And
okay.
and so my comps that I took at Berkeley were actually in in macro
Oh.
and and I was going to take public finance, but that's when the switch happened. In my second year, David Card came to Berkeley.
Oh, that's right. That's what, wait, so you're starting in 95 or 96 or something?
Yeah, I started in 96. It was, I don't know if you heard about, 96 was an unusual cohort for Berkeley. Usually they bring in like 12 students, but for some reason, someone screwed up in admissions and almost 50 people came.
Oh
50
my
people.
gosh.
Yeah.
What? That
Uh,
one year? That one?
yeah. And so there's speculation of how that happened. More people accepted offers than they thought. I don't know.
Yeah.
That year there was an article in the Wall Street Journal about Berkeley being a Renaissance economics department, uh, having a
Oh.
lot of policy links. And I don't know if that had a lot of impact, but there was something in the water that led to a very large cohort that year.
Who's
And
all in your cohort that year? Is Elizabeth Cassio in your cohort?
she came after.
Oh, okay.
There were people like Nicole Meistis, Helena,
Oh,
Helena Cortez, Bosch, Mazumder, Darren Labotsky. I think Enrico Moretti was around before. Um, and then Jesse Rothstein, Justin McCurry came after. Till van Wachter, I think, was our year. So it's
but
all,
wait, was it a one-time spike of 50? Does it go
yeah,
back to 12?
it goes back to 12.
Oh
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
gosh, all these professors are having to suddenly advise a million people.
Yeah. So when um when David started teaching, I remember his first labor class, and I think he was used to maybe six people showing up at Princeton. And he shows up and there's like 40 people in the class.
Oh my gosh.
And not just our cohort, but all the even the older cohorts wanted to kind of sit in on the
Yeah.
class and say audit it. So he's freaking out. He's
He's like, I
looking
gotta grade all these problem sets.
so
And I
he's
don't have any TAs because they're in the class.
yeah, exactly. So he's looking around and he's starting to like sweat and he's saying, "No, there's no way that you guys can all stay in here." And then he starts trying to dissuade us from taking the class. He said, "If you're gonna stay here, you're gonna have to work and you're gonna have to do all this stuff." But then he
Yeah.
proceeds to give this brilliant first lecture on
Yeah.
education,
Oh my
and
gosh.
most of the people want to stay. And so I think what happened was I remember going up on the after the course and looking up the grades, and they were all posted, student number and grades.
Yeah.
And they had, the 20 students there, but everyone got an A minus, A minus, A minus, A minus. So I think
Because
that's
he
how
was like, I
yeah,
can't grade all this.
yeah.
That's it. What's he like? What was he like as a teacher in that class? Was it because so I mean, because is it right like that you didn't really know a lot about him, or did you? I guess, well, yeah, what's the deal?
No, I mean, he had this obviously like reputation.
Because he had the John Bates Clark Award already, right?
Right, right. And so everyone was really intrigued and excited about this new arrival. He had
Yeah.
given a large talk and general talk to the whole faculty before he came, and people knew that he was doing some exciting work in labor.
Yeah.
And so there was a buzz in the air. Like I didn't really know, but he uh, within the first couple of lectures, there was this eye-opening appeal to his approach to empirical work.
Really?
And
You could
this,
tell? You could sort of feel it that
yeah,
you're talking about like how you're kind of talking about the characteristic like natural experiment kind of
exactly.
approach. You
Like,
could
and
tell.
it was all. at first it was sort of my first exposure to it, but the
Yeah.
intuition of uh, being able to identify effects that seemed real as
Right.
opposed to, finding some data that matched your model and made your case.
Mm.
This was the other way around, that we're going to, use natural variation that intuitively uh, makes sense. That was something I could get behind. That seemed like something I could do compared to
Oh.
like my comparative advantage was not modeling. And so this was something that appealed to me more as something I could learn and get good at.
Oh.
Um, like him and Josh always kind of says, like, what's the uh, hypothetical experiment that we're thinking of here? And I love that, like to be able to say, like, what's really going on here, this is as if we were randomizing X, and this is how we're going to do it from natural variation or from an instrumental variable, etc. And that just really intuitively hit me as something that made a lot of sense. And
Mm.
I think also for a lot of other people, like he just swallowed up a lot of students. I wasn't the only one that just completely changed fields and started working in this area.
You changed fields from public finance.
Public finance and natural,
It's
yeah.
one of your it's in the title of your dissertation, public finance, but it's like you sort of become this big L labor economist after that class with David.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously some elements of public finance that intersect with labor, but
Yeah.
it was really sort of in the area of labor that I got more and more into.
Well, so are you studying? Is education a big part of that? That's immediately you're moving towards education. Is that where it begins?
Almost. At the time, a lot of people were interested in neighborhood effects. This,
They were. That was there was already interest in that then.
yeah, there was an idea like, the can the neighborhood that you are surrounded in affect your long-term outcomes as kind of an externality? And there was, a lot of interesting sociology work by Julius Wilson and other
Yeah.
people pointing out that, you come from these areas of high density poverty, and that's going to affect you. And there really was not that much good empirical work out there. And so at the
Wait, so when
time,
does that William Julius Wilson book come out? The one with the W in the title, or what is the name of the book? There's this, he's
um,
got several famous ones. I can't
yeah,
remember.
something like The Broken Window, or
Yeah.
um,
But
we could
wait,
look
so
it
is
up.
it, it's a book, so it's relative. That's the main character. Is that right? Is that the main person that's talking about neighborhoods? Because MTO is not really coming out in print yet, is it at this point?
So, so what's happening is uh, MTO, the experiments in moving to opportunity have started, but the results haven't come out yet. And then there was this one, the MTO was motivated by this other work by James Rosenbaum. And
Mm.
what he does, he exploited this natural experiment from the Gautreaux uh, housing projects, where there was in Chicago a court ruling that uh, that the the city had been discriminating against, and there were too many disproportionately blacks um, that were being made to be in these crappy neighborhoods.
Oh,
And by court order, they were required to come up with the resources to move these households to other locations in more residential areas and less segregated areas.
what year is
And
that?
I want to
That's a
say,
while
like,
before. That's like older. Is that the deal?
yeah, it was before the MTO. That was like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's
so
like several
so
years. Okay.
Rosenbaum and others kind of use this as a natural experiment to say, like, look, if you look at the families that were assisted to move into neighborhoods that were less segregated and less poor, seemed to have longer term outcomes that were better than the ones who were not. And
Mm.
obviously, it wasn't a an actual experiment.
Yeah.
But when Larry Katz was in the government, uh, and he had an opportunity to encourage them to set up a more controlled experiment, which led to the Moving to Opportunity
So
study.
you know about it. You know, you're a grad
Right.
student and you're
So
like
this is going
dialed into
on.
all this.
This is going on, and I am desperately seeking a job market paper or topic, and I know that this is an interesting idea. So what happens is one of my colleagues from Statistics Canada is visiting, and I'm sitting down for him for dinner, and it's interesting. I got to know him through this work with generational accounting. That's kind of how I sort of met him. And he's telling me, look, we actually have a lot of data, administrative data. If you want, I can arrange it so that you can come and use it. And he's working with this intergenerational income data, um, intergenerational administrative data. So he's got tax files of parents matched to children.
Yeah.
And so that was my starting point of saying, look, I can get access to this data. Now what can I do with it?
Yeah.
And so with
Wait, so oh, you that's the connection to get this data?
yeah, I had a friend and colleague at Statistics Canada. At that time, the use of administrative data in Canada was
Yeah.
very rare.
Yeah.
And so I had to go over to Ottawa and become a deemed employee to actually use it.
What is this like 99, nineteen ninety
Yeah,
nine or something?
like around 2000, 1999, exactly. Yeah. And and so I thought, look, there's this Gautreaux stuff. Maybe there's a similar type of natural experiment in Canada. And I started looking at public housing setups in different cities
Hey
in
Phil,
Canada.
real quick, does David teach you to go after the natural experiment, or does he kind of motivate you more to go after the data, or does he motivate you to go after the question? How are you being mentored at Berkeley about this? Because, you know, some people I think chase the natural experiment and let the question come from it, but it sounds like you go for the data and you're not really sure what you're going to do yet.
I think that's always been sort of my recommendation of like a good strategy.
Yeah.
You might not always come up with the question that you'd like to look at, but
Yeah.
it's a good starting point to find the kind of variation that gives you a convincing paper.
Oh, you
Uh,
go after the variation first.
a little bit of both, you know, like uh, having access to a data set that you, that other people don't have is a
Yeah.
nice way of uh, starting point to search for something that other people haven't done yet, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I think David didn't give a lot of sort of intuition or instructions on how to go out about finding a paper. I think we
Mm,
were sort of left on our own to kind of let our minds wander and find things, read a lot of papers, see what other people are
mm.
working on. I think it just came from enough exposure to what other people are working on in this area that it got you thinking, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So you go up here, you're going up to Ottawa, and so do you this is going to be a neighborhood paper? This is your
Yeah, so
campaign.
what
This
ha
is it.
it turns out that in Toronto, there are a lot of public housing projects. So areas of residence where owned by the government, owned by the city of Toronto, the Metro Toronto Housing Corporation. And if you get in, uh, you know, you just have to pay rent geared to income. So you basically don't pay much.
Okay.
But the housing stock actually turns out to be quite scattered around the city. So, you know, you go on the internet at the time and you
Oh,
see a picture and you realize that it's not just the high-rise apartments that are the public housing in Toronto. They're there, but they also
yeah.
have scattered, much less dense housing projects in more middle income type of neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And it turns out that when you're on the waiting list for one of these places,
Yeah.
you don't have much say in what housing project you want to be in. You just sort of get the whatever becomes available at the time.
Yeah.
So whether you end up in one of these high density, low income neighborhoods or a more middle income neighborhoods is as good as random. So that turned
Mm.
out to be a nice natural experiment, and I could use this data StatsCan to um, look at uh, families when the kids were in their young teens in these different housing projects and follow them to when they were, uh, um, in their young 30s.
That kind of long-term tracking, that couldn't have been real common back then.
No, I think that's
Um,
what made the paper of interest. Like the paper is
yeah,
called
yeah.
the long-term effects of neighborhood effects.
Wow, wow. So the design was what? The design was if you get in, it's quasi-random if you're going to be exposed to high density areas. Is that the or like is that the treatment? What's the treatment exactly?
Yeah, it's basically when you're on the waiting list, it's you basically have as good as random assignment into these different housing projects. And so I
Mm.
first had to show that the neighborhood quality in these projects, the variation was high enough that you might expect to see differences.
Yeah.
And then once you have that, you just, you're kind of comparing outcomes across the distribution of different quality housing projects to see if you see any difference. And the short answer was, I didn't find anything. I didn't find any differences in labor market outcomes or social assistance receipt for these children who were coming from very different housing projects.
No effects, null effects on the results.
Right. And I always sort of said, well, if the MTO results are going to come out, I had an answer for whether they were the same or not. If they were the same, I could say, well, I beat you to that result.
Right.
If they were different, I could say, well, it's because the neighborhood quality differences in Canada and Toronto were just not as extreme as the ones examined in MTO. Like
Mm.
the um, the public housing in Chicago and New York and uh, were just a lot more extreme. And
Mm.
maybe one reason they were different. Now, what ended up happening is first the MTO results showed no effects for children. And then upon closer look, they realized that the effects were there, but only when the children were young, when they moved to the better neighborhoods.
Could you have done that?
It's a good question. I could not on the data set I had because the match was with these tax records, uh, and I could only identify households where the children were in their early teens. So
Oh.
I couldn't look. I didn't know if they moved when they were. I didn't know exactly when they moved before they were 13.
Oh. Wow. Wow. What was the response to the paper? What Dave think about the paper?
I think he liked it. To be honest, I wasn't sure whether I would do well in the US job market because it was a paper with Canadian data. It was just sort of a little natural experiment in Canada. But I think David was more optimistic than I was, and I was pleasantly surprised that I did well in the market, attracting attention and having a good market to present this work even
What
in the
was the
US.
buzz around it? Well, if you think back now, like what was it? Was it Phil's got this natural experiment, or is it like, oh, it's MTO, like something's in the air? What was it that people were getting kind of like noticing if you look back now?
I think at the time it was before MTO, it was one of the first uh, studies with natural variation looking at this question and able to look at long-term effects. And the
Right.
fact that it was in Toronto didn't seem to matter. It was more interesting that the identification strategy was credible.
Oh, the identification strategy. This is kind of okay. The identification strategy. So there, so, so without the identification strategy, it might have been that somebody starts saying, "This is Canada. This is not. This is the United States." Like they might start making some sort of judgment about if it's generalizable. But at that time, it's like it's more that something is being answered.
Yeah, I think, there was that question that came up. This is Canada, this is Toronto. Is it, what's the external validity?
Yeah.
I think I did my best to show that uh, the bad or poor neighborhoods in Toronto were areas that you might expect to also see similar types of outcomes compared to the high density neighborhoods in in the cities in the US. There certainly was
Yeah.
big differences in crime, but
Mm,
not on the nearly on the same magnitude. Say homicides per capita were much
yeah.
higher there. But I don't think I could get do as well on the job market now with that paper than I did back then, right? Just back then, uh, credible identification, natural experiments were really still, welcomed new approach that a
Yeah.
lot of people appreciated. And, you didn't need a lot of additional, modeling behind that work.
Mm,
Uh, so I think maybe I kind of got lucky around when I
yeah.
came up with that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When does your recession paper come out? Graduating in recessions? Because now I'm just like I'm never good with dates. But I'm just now piecing together. You start out with this interest in macro,
Yeah,
and now
so
I'm just sort of wondering a little bit.
I'll, take a quick sec. So while that paper was being wrapped up, the job market paper, I had this other
That's the one
idea.
that goes into the QJE too, right? That one's the
Right,
2003 QJE. Okay.
right. And then the paper before the recessions, I had started, being impressed with this compulsory schooling literature using compulsory schooling as an instrument for education.
Mm,
The idea that you are sort of facing restrictive laws on when you can leave school as soon as possible and
yeah.
using that as an instrument for getting more schooling.
Yeah.
And what was, really interesting about that at the time when people were talking about instruments as a local average treatment effect,
Yeah.
the compliers for compulsory schooling are actually the non-compliers. These are the guys who would rather not take the education if they were not exposed to the instrument, right? And so you've got this interesting uh, result where you have estimated large gains in lifetime wealth from essentially being compelled to take more schooling that you don't want,
Yeah.
which is really hard to explain within the human capital investment model. So that
Yeah.
got, and so I became interested in that from a sort of behavioral perspective. Is it
Mm.
possible that people are not optimizing in their education choices? And that you might get the situation that you might be better off by having policies steer you in a direction that you and for education that might want to go. So that I started working on that paper, including wanting to look at not just income on the left-hand side, but things like all sorts of well-being outcomes, including happiness. So that's how that paper
Oh.
got started. I started thinking of like, can we also show not only a return on compulsory schooling, but a return on feeling happier later on in life, even
Mm.
though you did something, we made you do something you didn't want to do when you were
Oh.
younger, right?
You're still looking at long-term stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where my interest in education started, especially around thinking about
Oh.
applications to behavioral economics on
Yeah.
education. Now,
Oh, really?
when all of this was going on, I still had access to the StatsCan admin data, and it sort of, I don't know, just occurred to me it might be interesting to use variation in I had this administrative data of people graduating from different universities in and colleges in Canada
Yeah.
matched to their long-term earnings. So I could look at wage dynamics over time, starting when they graduated. And so I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to look at? I wonder if the timing of when they graduate matters. It was sort of some rumors or suggestions that it does. And I was talking to Till van Wachter, who was like, one or two cohorts behind me at the time, and saying, "Look, I think I'm interested in working on this." And then there was a long pause, and he says, "Well, I think I was interested in working on this." So somehow we came up around the same idea at the same time. I had the
Mm.
data, and we decided, look, let's just work together on this. So that's how the recessions paper came about, is that basically I went back to Ottawa and started playing with this really nice data. It again was one of the first data sets that no one really at the time had a lot of access to, where you had a panel of administrative tax data linked to uh, where people started in college. So you can
Yeah.
look at over time people graduating from different regions, different places, and different economic conditions, and then could look at the wage dynamics over that period.
This time when you're an assistant professor at Toronto, first of all, why do you go back to Toronto? I mean, was it just another I took the best job, or was it a real strong geographic preference that you go back to Canada?
Yeah, that's a good question. I had a good market. I had quite a few range of options, but there was no one that sort of clearly dominated.
Mm,
Some of them that were quite interesting to me were Duke University, UCL, Rochester, Davis. And so you said earlier, like I'm a bit of a city guy, and of all the places, the largest cities where I had offers at were London, UCL,
yeah,
and Toronto.
right.
And so being a little bit risk averse and at the margin, knowing that, my parents and my family was still back in Toronto, it's familiar,
Yeah,
and liking the city,
yeah,
that probably at the margin made the difference for me going back there.
yeah, yeah. Um, so as an assistant professor, I always kind of felt like there were some people that that I would just say hit the ground running. They graduated and it was almost like they just seemed to have all the latent knowledge of what it was going to take, as well as the willingness to do it and the resources to do it. And others, I always sort of felt like I was sort of lost a little bit about what it was going to take to publish even. And so I'm just curious, what was it like for you as an assistant professor? Did you sort of feel like you immediately understood the profession really well?
I don't know. I think my experience at Berkeley was really nice as a way to be exposed to all these people that were excited with their work and
Mm,
realizing that they're just human too. And, you know, there was a lot of encouragement just to be patient and, the ideas will come. I
mm,
got lucky that my first research projects did well getting published in good journals,
yeah,
and that made it easier to take off the pressure of whether I would get tenure or not. So within
right.
a year or two, I had some top publications that allowed me to not worry so much about um, focused on tenure and instead more focused on what I wanted to work on next.
I see.
And I just started making a list. One person at at Berkeley was George Akerlof, who encouraged us to come up with an idea every week, no, or three ideas every week, no matter
Mm.
how crazy, and just put them on paper and talk to someone about them. And that was his
Oh,
suggestion for
and
what,
talk to people.
yeah, yeah. And
Oh,
this is actually how he came up with his lemons paper, because he would be talking with Tom Rothenberg with three crazy ideas, and he always attributes Rothenberg as being the one who said, "Work on that one." Like, so he would,
oh. That's the first time I've heard somebody link the come up with an idea all the time, but also the socializing of the idea. I've not heard that
Yeah,
before.
I think, having a chance to, uh, with no judgment, run your ideas by someone, and
Yeah,
even if they're just half baked, uh,
right.
I think it's so much more productive because when you're on your own, you're always worried and
Yep.
self-doubting, and you're harsher judged to yourself than your friends are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so having a chance to have like a support group around coming up with ideas, I think that's great.
Well, so when you go up for tenure, you get letters, and I know you haven't read your own letters, but I'm wondering, sometimes the letter writer might be trying to explain who Phil is to a colleague, someone in the department, or maybe your own colleagues at Toronto, they're trying to explain Phil to, an economic theorist or someone like that. And I'm just kind of curious, when you were sort of that young, a couple of years out and you're going up for tenure, what do you think how do you think people tried to say, well, Phil's like this. He's not like this. He's this type of economist doing this type of work, and this is where it's going. What do you think people saw you as?
I mean, I did have a chance to read anonymized versions of my tenure letters, and they were really,
Uh-huh.
really flattering. Like it was one of the, best feelings, seeing that a lot of people seemed to approve of what I was doing. I I think that the kind of things that they were saying was like, like I'm willing to be wrong.
Mhm.
I sort of start off with uh, not feeling I know I have all the answers and not feeling that this project is going to turn out and wanting to make sure I understand uh, the research clearly out there and what the possible objections might be before I can feel confident presenting or talking
Yeah.
about it. And so I think that's led to, um, you
Oh,
know,
so
uh,
that's how you were? You were sort of willing to go out a little bit with that kind of a little bit of some doubt or open-mindedness a little bit?
yeah, some modesty around doing empirical work. And
Oh,
if anything, like, over time, it's sort of my, you know, I, I've just, it's my impression of how difficult it is to uncover, strong effects or effects that are worthwhile getting excited about. This is very difficult. Like,
yeah.
in over time, I started doing more and more running experiments,
Mm,
uh, in part because of the frustration of spending the entire seminar trying to convince people that you have credible
yeah.
research design, right?
Right. Right.
Um, so I appreciated that. I still do. But there was something appealing to randomizing and then
Yeah.
being done with it. I'm just going to compare means and you're going to see what happens,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
That's the
even
framework.
then,
Yeah.
right, you start to get into major challenges with external validity
Yeah.
and fidelity. Most of the time, the experiment that you want to run isn't the one that you actually run. And now
Yeah.
you're left with this null result and not sure whether it's because your intended experiment went off the wire or because there's just nothing there.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. 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 Right. 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 That's very dissatisfying to go to all the work and still not know what's going on. Uh, the I'm curious, it's so interesting. You start out, and maybe this isn't the arc, but you start out with these very large interventions. Like pick a person up and put them in a different part of the city, and then you sort of move into these sort of soft touch kind of interest things like online coaching and mentoring and like sending messages. And I'm just kind of curious a little bit, what motivated that shift from these like the big things, putting aside even the experiment, or maybe it was the experiment, but these big experiments to these smaller behavioral focused interventions. What drove that?
So that earlier work on compulsory schooling piqued my interest on the possibility that uh, education decisions may not always be in the student's own best interests.
Oh,
So not
yeah, right.
not just how much education you get, but how hard you work, how much you study, what program do you go, do you fill out an application? And so that led me to reading up or trying to understand a little bit more of the behavioral literature, which at the time had been more focused on things like how to increase savings or how to make sure that you take your medication, but actually not a lot of work on education. But if there's any one group that might have behavioral problems, it's sort of teenagers trying to
Yeah.
decide whether to study, right?
Yep.
And so that really piqued my interest around trying to think about this literature that was all about um, nudging people towards doing something that we might think it be in their better interest while keeping the options open, and whether uh, that field could be applied more and more to education. So that led me, the starting point was around different areas, but the one that was sort of got the most traction was around helping students complete applications to go to college,
Ah,
uh, where something that seemingly shouldn't make a difference, when you actually take a closer look and realize how involved it is to apply to go to college, to apply for financial aid, to decide where to go, it's quite
yeah.
complicated. And most of
Yep.
the times, those from more affluent families get help, a lot of help to
Yeah.
navigate through that process. But if you're
Yeah.
from a first generation family, or if you're first generation and you're from a family hasn't gone, uh, navigating that can be really challenging. And
Yeah.
there's a couple of experiments a lot of people have shown that the assistance itself or making the process easier can make the difference between some people going or not.
Yeah. 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 So tell us a little bit about, when now that you've done so much work in this area, as well as these larger structural changes like neighborhoods or even, other things, what do you think now about the effectiveness and the limitations of these nudging style? Because this nudging
Yeah.
thing for you is probably very, very, it's more than just one thing. It's probably a larger thing. What do you think now, having done all this?
Yeah, I think over time I've become a little bit more jaded around the potential for nudging to make a meaningful difference in the education sort of policy sphere.
Mm,
I think that a lot of these policies of helping students with their application or study a little bit more, they seem to be satisfied the cost benefit, but not because the benefit is large, but because the cost is
the
small.
cost is low.
And uh, as I as I get older, I sort of think about what I want to spend my time on, and I would sometimes I feel like I've tried hard enough to move the dial through this approach of sending text messages or reminders or encouragement to students. But to change long-term habits seems to have been quite difficult. And
Mm,
that's led me now to change gears. And right now I'm actually focused more on pedagogy and in the education sphere around what evidence out there seems to indicate something that we should be doing more of. It's more personalized learning.
mm.
So if every student had their own teacher, one student, one teacher, a lot of problems in education would be solved because it would allow the student to progress at their own pace. It would allow, if a student wasn't getting the question right, that they'd get immediate feedback from the teacher. They would try to understand their misconception. They kind of move along. So the problem isn't that we don't really know how to teach, it's the cost of that kind of setup. And so that
Yeah.
is what makes me really intrigued of that's what brought me now to working with generative AI as
Yeah.
a way to lower the cost for facilitating more of that one-to-one type of interaction.
Oh, really? Wait, what are you working on? I didn't actually put this together.
Yeah, so it's sort of new. I'm looking at how to whether generative AI could facilitate this type of one-to-one instruction in a way that would allow students to progress more at their own pace in this type of mastery learning. Where if you take math as like an easy example, where you sort of progress in sequence, the right way to learn math is you work on a topic until you've demonstrated you fully understand it, and only then you move on to the next topic. And
Yeah.
the problem with the classroom setting is that you can't always do that. But with generative AI, there's the potential that every student can be using their own uh, AI
Their own
tutor.
tutor. Yep.
And so it's a question of like how good can this technology get? But not only how good it is, but how can you present it in a way that's going to encourage this type of learning?
Right. So what are you doing? You doing some experiments?
Yep. I have a couple things. First, I'm working with Khan Academy, which
Are you really?
yeah, so Khan, as you might know, is this computer assisted learning platform that also now has their own ChatGPT based tutor.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I am exploring a setup where teachers are being trained how to use it to facilitate this type of one-on-one learning, especially
Yep.
those who are in remedial instruction. So I have an experiment going on in Tennessee where remedial students are receiving an extra 30 minutes a day of math
Yeah.
and randomized at the grade level. Some are getting this intensive support using Khan and Conmigo, and others are not. And then the last
And
thing
Khan has the Gen AI. When you say
yeah,
Khan, it's got
yeah.
the already got the Gen
The,
AI.
the only thing is that the way it's set up now, students don't gravitate to this technology, even if it's there.
Yeah.
So I'm actually building out my own platform, working with some computer science faculty here at U of T, and we're
Right.
designing a platform that will have a more structure. And so we're going to
Those
test,
creative destruction lab people, like Johnny
yeah,
Hands and all those guys.
related
Okay.
beside those guys. And so um, we're designing a platform where we can A/B test a little bit more
Yeah.
than we can do with Con. And in that setup, we are going to try to explore what the value added of the AI technology is for,
Oh,
say, a 1 week experiment.
that's gonna be a great open question to sort of get some answers around that because I feel like I'm so excited by Gen AI, but I feel like I experience all these things that are real weird where I like learn something really fast, but I'm not really positive I learned it. And all these kinds of things where I offload a lot of the time the knowledge to the Gen AI and I can't tell if that's a big deal or not, you know?
Yeah, there's certainly like a ton of interest in this area, and the technology is moving way faster than the research.
Yeah.
It's a fun area to be working in because it's sort of like, like you and a lot of other people, there's the question of, where is this technology going? How can it actually be used for good?
Yeah.
Uh, and there's all these open research questions, and a lot of us are trying to work on them and kind of see where it goes.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, I never asked you about your athletics. And I'm just was gonna I had all these questions, but we sort of went where it went. But
Well, you organized the little 5K. I
yeah, you were
didn't get a
our
chance to ask
inaugural
you about
winner.
how amazing it was that you organized that. I thought that was really nice for you to put that together and bring a whole bunch of us together.
I know I didn't bring up that you're the inaugural first place winner of the AEA 5K.
When you had that, I think it was in Atlanta, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I was in such good shape. I don't know, like it just everything clicked on that year that And so I remember, this was done at like 5 in the morning or something
So
like that.
early. The route was like Daniel Bergstresser was it was just I'm surprised nobody got hurt. It was just so dark and
Well,
right.
I had a little secret. Like I ran the course before
Yeah.
the night before, but even on the morning where it was all dark, people were going. I think I went in the wrong direction once or
Yeah,
twice.
that's right. I remembered that. And you still won. That was so funny. Wait, didn't you? So then you would have picked a prize. Well, the prizes were all those autographed books. Which one did you pick?
I of all the nice prizes, I picked the Larry Katz and Claudia Golden's
You
book.
got the Larry Katz and the Claudia
Yeah,
Golden.
the
Oh,
race
that's the
between
race between. I know.
technology and education as
That's so
appropriate.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah, that
yeah.
was perfect. That was
It was
perfect.
nice because Larry sent me a congratulatory note, a little email saying, "I'm glad you picked the book." So that was nice.
Well, you're really a child of the credibility revolution. You have you were shaped so clearly by Card and even then by Princeton, just that whole ethos about credibility and wanting to, you even said it at the start, the idea that this might actually be a real answer. And so reflecting on your career, uh, and Berkeley, Princeton being the stream at the top, but also that just that Berkeley environment. So when you reflect on your career, what do you think you would tell a young person now just starting out in econ about what's been sort of unexpectedly meaningful and unexpectedly challenging about your own personal journey through all that?
Um, Well, I think the field has come uh, incredibly far from where when I was in grad school. I think that in labor in particular is a lot more focused on IO things and things that are going on in the firm,
Mm,
both because of just new data develops and a more awareness that what happens in the firm is important. So I think there's been a big shift. I would encourage students to be focused on, these more recent monopsony models and papers, trying to understand uh, different degrees of um, market power. That seems to be
mm.
where the field is going a lot. I guess my own experience has been, uh, try to be working on something that makes you excited to wake up in the morning, and the just be patient to come up with these ideas. Look for data sets that you might not have other people might not have access to, or come up with hypothetical experiments. Um, I think that there's a lot of potential for students to um, uh, uncover policies or data sets that with some effort and some shoe leather they can find and head in that direction.
I guess that hasn't changed then. That kind of hustle and shoe leather is still what you probably got in that's the permanent part of this. The topics have changed, but maybe the willingness to get out there and just find these things.
I think that's fair. Yeah, I think that with it's the hustle and being aware of what kinds of papers are attracting attention,
Yeah.
and then using that knowledge to seek out your own type of paper,
Yeah.
especially one that you're interested in, that you think is actually meaningful both to you and you think it might be of interest to other people.
And education and labor has just continued to be really meaningful to you.
Yeah, I still think that education has the potential to be a leveler, uh, and, to help those who uh, are coming from more disadvantaged backgrounds, as a way to uh, you know im improve their trajectory.
Yeah.
And I'm still really interested in the possibility of helping, how to help everyone reach their full potential through learning, as a way to help them, in their careers.
Well, this has been fun. It's been fun to catch up. I don't think we've talked in years since, but we haven't really known each other. So it's really nice to talk to you and to hear your story and to see how this pieces back together in these larger stories about labor and the credibility revolution and just your own personal part in it. I really appreciate you being on the show.
Well, I really appreciate you giving me a chance to kind of share my stories and everything else you're doing to put this podcast together. As I told you earlier, I think that's really great what you're doing. And I enjoy the podcast to listen even more than maybe I enjoy kind of giving them.
Well, cool. I'm glad to hear that. Well, you have a great day, and we're gonna try to hang out hopefully later this year when we're both kind of not so far away from each other.
For sure. Thanks,
Okay,
let's go. Okay.
cool.
She hated when I called.